Aha! Hi guys, these are the paints I used in this video. So the areas we need to watch out for are the sides. To be exact, the side of the legs, boots, skull and all the swords got some mod lines over the flat parts of the blades and the grips as well. Use the back of your blade and scrape them off. Losing some detail on these surfaces are not a big deal, but leaving the mod lines are. There are some nasty ones over the back which are a little bit harder to remove, but apply some pressure to the blade and it will come off eventually. Once you remove those, prime the Mini with black, or if you primed it already, like I did, just use a black paint to cover the scraped spots, but first remove the shavings with a dry brush. And make sure you don't cover those with the paint, or you will seal them and they create some very bad texture over the surface. I like to make another round once I prime the Mini, because there are lots of mod lines you can't see until it's primed, unfortunately. I'm using the character card as a reference. As you can see, we have a nice pale green with a very saturated red pattern on the skin. I start with the green parts with Deathworld Forest using a base layer consistency. I cover all the skin, leaving only the tattoo pattern black and some of the largest wounds. It's a little bit challenging to figure out where the wounds end and where the skin starts. It's pretty similar to Granny's skin when she had flesh-eating bacteria. Maybe I need to change her bed sheets more than once a year, but no worries, she's fine now. And losing some weight was really beneficial to her. To have a better understanding on the skin parts, I covered the tattoos and the larger wounds with burnt red using a base layer consistency. This Mini have some very interesting open wounds and blisters that we can emphasize at later steps, so make sure you don't miss these, like I did with the exposed skin parts on the leg. Cover the eyes and teeth with ice yellow, leaving some recessed shadows between each tooth for more definition, and come to the realization that Zombie Drex without a nose looks like a Ninja Turtle without a shell at this point. Let's mix some orruk flesh to the Deathworld Forest to make a slight value step and start the highlight process. Basically, every part of the body that is facing up should be covered with a thin layer consistency using multiple layers until we reach maximum opacity with the paint. We don't want to get rid of the small details, so leave the recessed shadows darker, like between the muscle fibers of the forearm, and you can make the abs look more defined doing the same. The character has a hunched posture, so there will be more light catching the back. On the back, try to emphasize the muscle fibers for more detail and place the larger volumes on the top half of each muscle group. Once you are done with the sketching, blend in this layer with a glaze consistency to smooth out the transitions. To have nicer blends, remove the excess paint from your brush on a paper towel and start your brushstroke in the lower value area and move it to the higher value one. Repeat this process until your gradient will be as smooth as a granny's butt cheek. Reduce the highlight areas of the skin with orruk flesh and add more volume to the chest and shoulder areas. On the face, bring out the cheeks and the chin more. There are some tendons around the mouth which you can't really see, but we can pick those out next to the mouth to emphasize the rotten look and add more depth to the skin. By the way, the swords that went through the character's body are very nice anchor points for your hand. They are quite sturdy. I thought it's going to be very inconvenient to paint a Mini like that, that is obscured by those swords, but they are really not a big deal, so shout out to whoever sculpted it. As you can see, I use multiple coats of paint to make sure I reach the maximum opacity with thinner layers, and if the transition is a little bit rough, that's not really an issue because I'm repeating the blending process with the current paint like we did in the previous step. Only this time I move my brush from the previous layer to the recent one, glazing over smaller and smaller areas. To push the contrast on the skin, I mix some ice yellow to the orruk flesh. To break down the smoothness of the skin, but not the gradients, the texture, I aim for a more fibery look with some vertical lines over the upper mouth area and some horizontal stripes over the pecs. On the upper mouth area, I emphasize these parts with some deathworld forest recess shadows to create a more parched feel to the skin. This is the zombie version of the character, so I like to use more desaturated schemes to create a fitting undead vibe. Pick out the forearm muscles as well, but remember that we need more volume on the shoulders and chest to keep the focal point on the head. Once we are done with the sketching, time to blend in this layer as well. On some of the areas where I emphasize the fibery look, we don't need that dark recess shadows, so I glaze over those parts to mute back the shadows and make the transition smooth as Granny's butt cheek. We are done with the green parts, so now comes the red highlights on the tattoos. Since the skin is very desaturated, we are going to make these parts very saturated to have a nice contrast between the saturated and desaturated parts, which can be another artsy-fartsy parallel for an undead metaphor. Green is complementary to red, although this green and red are not exactly complementary colors because we would need to use a more pale magenta to create the harmonic scheme, but Drek's tattoos are red, so that's what we are using. We need to align these red highlights with the rest of our green paints, so you basically cover the areas of the tattoos where we placed our green highlights. There is really not much to it, only to look out for the areas like the triceps to acknowledge the recess areas where the muscle turns under the shoulders to bring out the muscles more. I'm using thin layer consistency, so it's blending in very nicely with the previous burnt red layer. Now comes the part that I really enjoyed. You see the character has these larger necrotic blisters around his body. Let's cover those with a mix of burnt red and genestealer purple. Not just the blisters, but a little bit of the areas around it to add an inflamed look to the skin. Pick out the blisters with genestealer purple, and once you've done that, glaze a little bit of that purple inside the previous layer of burnt red and genestealer purple mix to create a gradient. Don't go crazy about it, 1 or 2 layers are more than enough to do that, since these areas are super small. Leave those blisters for a while and mix some ice yellow to the burnt red to highlight the bigger wounds. The mixture will create a pale rotten flesh tone, which will bring out these details very nicely. While you highlight these small parts, watch out not to make any mistakes on the already done parts of the skin, or I will slap on your tiny head. Add more ice yellow to the mix and try to make small lines following the muscle fibers that could show through the ripped skin to add more detail to these parts. Go back to the blisters as well and place 2 highlights on the bigger ones diagonally. One on the top left part and the smaller on the bottom right half of each large blister. This will make them nice and shiny as they are ready to pop at any second, like the large zit in Granny's armpit. You can see the mini is almost finished at this point. You can find the whole PDF painting guide on my Patreon page. Now I'm going to use some True Blood around the stab wounds. If you want to use a matte varnish on your mini, do it before this step, because the matte varnish is going to mute the glossiness of the blood effect. These technical paints are usually not covering very well, and we need multiple layers of it to make it visible. If you don't want to buy these technical paints like True Blood or Blood for the Blood God, just buy some gloss medium and mix it to your favorite blood color. It will be exactly the same. Now I want some blood on the blades as well, but we need to understand how blood behaves on a blade. As you can see, it creates more of a webby pattern. I'm guessing because most blades are coated in some oil, so the surface tension creates the pattern as the blood and oil contacts on the blade. So we don't have too much surface to do that, but we create a similar pattern on the blades. Around the wounds, focus on the lower half of each wound, since that's where the fluids will build up more. You need a couple of layers to reach the desired effect, but be patient because we are almost done. To make a nice variation next to our shiny blood effect, I'm going to use some quote-unquote matte blood as well with burnt red. I was just using quotation because I'm not going to mix any matte medium to the paint because these paints usually dries to a more matte finish. I'm using a small piece of cellulose sponge to create some pattern over the surfaces. Dip the sponge in water, remove the excess on a paper towel, and do the same after dipping it into paint. Try it on your hand first to see if you like the pattern and apply it very gently over the mini. Less is more, so don't try to cover all the mini with these small blood splatters. Try to make it random so the pattern will look more organic. And that's it, guys. Thanks for watching, and I hope you find this video helpful. If you'd like to access the PDF painting guide for the whole character and more exclusive content for Marvel Zombies and Massive Darkness 2, consider joining my Patreon page, like these lovely people. And a special shout out goes to Cold-Blooded Dom, Trying to Paint Minis, Jonathan Mosner, Glitchy McCrash, Penoman45, Michael Kerr, Remlo, and Michael Hatton. I hope your day will be as smooth as a granny's butt cheek.